I want to tell you about a patient of mine. His name is Harold. Harold is 73 years old, and he came to see me about 11 months ago, referred by his cardiologist, because his kidney function numbers had been declining quietly and steadily for the past 2 years. His eGFR, his estimated glomerular filtration rate, the most accurate measure of how well the kidneys are filtering, had dropped from 68 to 54 in 24 months. And his potassium level was 5.6, which is elevated above the normal range of 3.5 to 5, and moving in a direction that his cardiologist found concerning. Now, Harold was not a man who ignored his health. He was the opposite. He was meticulous. He took his medications every morning without fail. He exercised. He watched what he ate. He had cut back on salt, on processed food, on red meat. He had done everything his doctors had told him to do, and yet his kidneys were getting worse. Not dramatically, not in a way that felt urgent, but steadily, month by month, in a direction that concerned everyone who was looking after him. And when I sat down with Harold and went through his diet in detail, I found something that his cardiologist had not asked about, that his previous doctor had not asked about, and that Harold himself had no reason to question, because everything he had ever been told suggested it was one of the healthiest things he could possibly eat. Every single morning, Harold was eating a banana and a glass of fresh orange juice and a generous serving of dried apricots for breakfast every day without fail for the past 4 years, since his cardiologist had told him to increase his potassium intake for his blood pressure, and Harold had done exactly what he was told. He had dramatically increased his intake of high potassium fruits every single morning. And those fruits, in the context of his declining kidney function, were very likely contributing to the elevated potassium. That was now concerning his entire medical team. I looked at Harold and I said, Harold, the advice you were given was right for a healthy set of kidneys, but your kidneys are not the same kidneys you had 4 years ago. And what was right then may not be right now. And that is what I want to talk about today. I am Dr. Daniel Chen, and today I want to explain something that is one of the most important and least discussed nutritional issues for adults over 65 with any degree of kidney function decline. And that is this: several fruits that are genuinely healthy for people with normal kidney function and that doctors routinely recommend for blood pressure, for heart health, for general well-being, become genuinely problematic for people whose kidney function has declined below certain thresholds because of their potassium content. And after 65, as I have discussed in previous videos, kidney function declines in almost everyone by approximately 1% per year after 40. Many adults over 65 have kidneys that are functioning at 60 to 70% of their peak capacity without knowing it, without feeling any symptoms, without any obvious signs that anything has changed. And in those kidneys, with that reduced capacity, a potassium load that healthy younger kidneys would handle without difficulty can accumulate to levels that are dangerous for the heart. Now, let me explain why potassium matters so much to the kidneys and why elevated potassium in the blood is one of the most serious electrolyte imbalances that can occur in an older adult with declining kidney function. Potassium is an essential mineral. The body needs it for muscle function, for nerve transmission, for blood pressure regulation, for heart rhythm. All of these are critically important, and potassium is genuinely good for people with healthy kidneys. The problem arises when kidney function declines because the kidneys are the primary organs responsible for regulating potassium levels in the blood. In a healthy kidney, excess potassium that has been absorbed from food is filtered out of the blood and excreted in the urine efficiently, continuously, automatically, keeping blood potassium within the normal range of approximately 3.5 to 5 milliequivalents per liter. But when kidney function declines below approximately 60%, this filtering and excretion of excess potassium becomes less efficient. The kidneys cannot remove potassium from the blood as quickly as it arrives from dietary sources, and potassium begins to accumulate in the bloodstream, a condition called hyperkalemia, elevated blood potassium. And hyperkalemia is not simply a number on a blood test. It is a condition with direct and serious effects on the heart, because potassium is the primary electrolyte that regulates the electrical activity of the heart muscle. When potassium rises above 5.5, the electrical conduction system of the heart begins to be affected. The heart rhythm can become irregular, dangerously irregular. As potassium rises further, above 6 or above 6.5, the risk of life-threatening arrhythmia increases significantly. And at very high potassium levels, the heart can stop entirely. This is why hyperkalemia in an older adult with declining kidney function is taken so seriously by nephrologists and cardiologists, and why the dietary potassium intake of older adults with reduced kidney function needs to be specifically and carefully managed. Now, let me tell you which fruits are the most significant sources of dietary potassium that I see contributing to problems in my patients over 65 with declining kidney function. The first fruit is bananas. And I want to pause here for a moment because I know that for many people, reading the word banana in the context of what not to eat feels deeply counterintuitive. Bananas have been recommended by doctors, by dietitians, by health educators as one of the healthiest fruit choices available. And for people with healthy kidneys, they are. A medium banana contains approximately 422 milligrams of potassium. And in a healthy adult with fully functioning kidneys, that potassium is beneficial for blood pressure, for muscle function, for heart health. The kidneys handle it efficiently, and any excess is excreted in the urine. But in an adult over 65, whose kidneys are functioning at 55 or 60% of capacity, a daily banana as part of a broader diet that includes other potassium-containing foods can contribute to a cumulative potassium load that exceeds what those declining kidneys can efficiently manage. Harold was eating a banana every morning because his cardiologist had told him to increase his potassium intake for his blood pressure. And that advice was right at the time it was given, when Harold's kidneys were functioning adequately. But as his kidney function declined, nobody revisited that advice. Nobody said, "Harold, your kidneys are working harder now. The potassium advice needs to change." And Harold continued eating his daily banana with the best of intentions and no way of knowing that the situation had changed. The second fruit is oranges and orange juice. A medium orange contains approximately 237 milligrams of potassium, and a glass of orange juice contains approximately 496 milligrams. Harold was drinking a daily glass of orange juice as part of his heart-healthy morning routine. That glass of orange juice alone was delivering almost 500 milligrams of potassium every single morning, on top of the banana, on top of the dried apricots that I will come to shortly. The third fruit is dried apricots, and this is the one that I want to spend the most time on because it is the most significant and the most commonly overlooked source of concentrated potassium in the diets of older adults who are trying to eat healthily. Fresh apricots contain approximately 90 milligrams of potassium per apricot, which is not particularly high, and in a diet for someone with healthy kidneys is entirely manageable. But dried apricots are a completely different matter. When fruit is dried, the water is removed, but the minerals remain concentrated in a dramatically smaller volume. A single dried apricot contains approximately 80 to 90 milligrams of potassium, almost as much as a whole fresh apricot in a piece that is a fraction of the size. And because dried fruit is so much smaller and denser than fresh fruit, people eat significantly more of it than they would of the equivalent fresh fruit before feeling satisfied. A small handful of dried apricots, which many older adults eat as a healthy snack or as part of a breakfast, can easily contain 10 to 15 pieces. That is 800 to 1350 milligrams of potassium. From that small handful alone, Harold was eating a generous serving of dried apricots every morning with his banana and his orange juice. And the combined potassium from just that one meal was over 2,000 milligrams from fruit alone before he had eaten anything else for the entire day. Now, the general dietary guideline for potassium intake in healthy adults is approximately 2,600 milligrams per day for women and 3,400 milligrams per day for men. Harold was consuming over half of that guideline in a single fruit-based breakfast. And for someone with kidneys operating at significantly reduced capacity, the appropriate dietary potassium limit is typically much lower, often 2,000 milligrams or less per day, as determined by their nephrologist, based on their specific kidney function and potassium levels. Harold's morning fruit routine was delivering more potassium than his kidneys could handle before he had eaten a single other thing for the rest of the day. The fourth fruit I want to mention is kiwi. Now, I discussed the cardiovascular benefits of kiwi in a previous video on blood pressure. And those benefits are real and genuinely well documented for adults with healthy kidney function. But kiwi contains approximately 215 milligrams of potassium per fruit. And for adults with declining kidney function, the same fruit that lowers blood pressure and supports endothelial health in a healthy adult adds to the potassium burden that compromised kidneys are struggling to manage. The fifth fruit is avocado. And I want to mention this specifically because avocado has become one of the most universally recommended health foods of the past decade, and it deserves its excellent reputation. For adults with healthy kidneys, but half an avocado contains approximately 487 milligrams of potassium, making it one of the highest potassium foods available. And for adults over 65 with reduced kidney function who are already managing potassium from multiple other dietary sources, avocado, beloved and beneficial in a healthy context, becomes a food that needs to be carefully considered in the context of total dietary potassium. Now, I want to be extremely clear about something before I continue, because this is a nuanced topic, and nuance matters. I am not telling every person over 65 to stop eating bananas and avocados and kiwi. I am absolutely not saying that. The advice to eat these foods is correct for the majority of older adults whose kidney function, while somewhat reduced, is still adequate to manage a normal dietary potassium load. What I am saying is that for adults over 65 who have been told that their kidney function is declining, whose eGFR is below 60, whose potassium levels have been trending upward, or who are taking medications that themselves raise potassium, including ACE inhibitors ARBs, and potassium-sparing diuretics. The dietary potassium picture needs to be specifically and carefully discussed with their doctor, or ideally with a renal dietitian, a specialist in the dietary management of kidney disease. Because for those individuals, the same fruits that are correctly recommended for heart health and general well-being in the general population can contribute to a potassium accumulation that puts their heart at risk from a completely different direction. This is the nuance that Harold's cardiologist had not addressed. Not out of negligence, but because the interplay between kidney function, dietary potassium, and cardiovascular risk in older adults is complex and falls between the specialties. In a way, that means it is sometimes missed unless someone is looking at the whole picture together. Now, let me tell you what I told Harold and what actually happened. I sat with Harold and I explained exactly what I have just explained to you about how his kidneys were no longer handling potassium with the same efficiency they once had, and how the fruits he had chosen with the best intentions were contributing to the elevated potassium that was concerning everyone. I referred him to a renal dietitian who worked with him to redesign his diet in a way that still supported his cardiovascular health and his blood pressure, but within the potassium limits that his kidneys could safely manage. The changes included replacing dried apricots with fresh or frozen berries, which are lower in potassium and still rich in antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds that support cardiovascular health. Replacing orange juice with a small glass of diluted apple juice or simply water with lemon for the vitamin C without the high potassium load. Replacing the daily banana with an apple or a handful of grapes or fresh pineapple, which are significantly lower in potassium, and adding leaching techniques for the vegetables in his diet, which involve peeling, cutting, and soaking vegetables in water for several hours before cooking, which draws out a significant proportion of the potassium from high potassium vegetables, making them safer for people who need to restrict potassium. Harold came back 6 weeks later. His potassium had come down from 5.6 to 4.9, still slightly above the lower half of normal, but moving clearly in the right direction. His eGFR at his 3-month blood test had stabilized at 54, not declining further. For the first time in 2 years, he looked at me and he said, "Dr. Chen, I was trying so hard to do the right thing. I just did not have the right information for where my kidneys actually are right now." And that is the sentence that stayed with me, that I keep coming back to when I think about why I make these videos. I was trying so hard to do the right thing. I just did not have the right information for where my kidneys actually are right now. So many older adults are in Harold's position, following advice that was right at a different time, in a different body, with different kidneys. And nobody has sat down and updated the conversation to reflect where things actually are right now. Let me bring everything together. After 65, kidney function declines in almost everyone. And when kidney function falls below approximately 60%, the kidneys become less efficient at excreting potassium from the blood. High potassium foods, including bananas, oranges and orange juice, dried apricots, kiwi, and avocado, that are genuinely healthy choices for adults with normal kidney function, can contribute to a cumulative dietary potassium load that compromised kidneys cannot manage safely, leading to elevated blood potassium that threatens heart rhythm and cardiovascular safety. This does not mean these foods are bad. It means they need to be assessed in the context of current kidney function, current potassium levels, and current medications. If your eGFR is below 60, if your potassium has ever been flagged as elevated on a blood test, or if you are taking ACE inhibitors, ARBS, or potassium-sparing diuretics, please have a specific conversation with your doctor about your dietary potassium intake and ask whether a referral to a renal dietitian would be appropriate. Because what was right for your kidneys 4 years ago may not be right for your kidneys today, and you deserve to know the difference. I am Dr. Daniel Chen. If this video gave you information that changes how you think about the fruits you eat every morning after 65, please share it with someone who is also over 65 with kidney disease or declining kidney function, who has been told to eat more fruit without anyone discussing the potassium context of that advice. Subscribe to this channel for weekly videos made with genuine care for older adults who deserve real information about their own health. And leave me a comment below. Tell me what your most recent eGFR number was and whether anyone has ever discussed dietary potassium with you in relation to your kidney function. I read every single comment, and I genuinely look forward to hearing from you. Take care of your kidneys. They are doing everything they can for you every single day. They deserve the same care in return.